poets with new or forthcoming books every other Friday through October 30th. To see the full lineup for Books Noted Live and our fall-winter season of events, please visit Poets.org. My name is Tara Jayakar. I'm the Associate Content Editor and Producer at the Academy of American Poets. For those of you who don't know us, we are the nation's leading champion of poets, poetry, and poetry organizations. We produce Poets.org, National Poetry Month, which is celebrated every April, and the popular Poem a Day series, among many other free programs and online resources. Our programs are made possible in part by the New York State Council for the Arts and the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs. Our virtual events this fall-winter season are kept free thanks to generous contributions by you, our audience members. If you're able to make a contribution, please click on the button below to donate now. Before I introduce our two poets and our wonderful ASL interpreters, I would like to acknowledge that I am joining this virtual reading and conversation from Brooklyn, New York, which is the traditional lands of the Munsee, Lenape, and Canarsie people, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. I would also like to provide a description of my video feed. I am a brown woman of South Indian descent in her early 30s, wearing black and gold wire-rimmed glasses and round Sony black headphones. My hair is pulled back up in a bun, and behind me is a window with a spider plant hanging in it. And finally, as our poets are reading, we'll have time for a few questions from the audience at the end. So please use the chat tool below to send guests your questions. And I would like to remind everybody to be respectful of your fellow audience members and of our guest poets in the chat. Thank you so much for your cooperation. Okay, tonight I am absolutely thrilled and honored to introduce Aditi Machado and Pamela Sneed. Aditi is a poet and translator and essayist. Her second book of poems, Emporium, received the James Laughlin Award and is available for pre-order from Nightboat Books. Her other works include the poetry collection Some Beheadings, also out with Nightboat. A former poetry editor for Asymptote, she currently works as an assistant professor at the University of Cincinnati. To order Emporium from Nightboat Books, please click the link button below. Our second reader is Pamela Sneed, a New York-based poet, performer, visual artist, and educator. She is the author of Funeral Diva, which is available for pre-order from City Lights Books, and the collections Sweet Dreams, Kong, Imagine Being More Afraid of Freedom Than Slavery, and others. Sneed has performed at the Whitney Museum, the Brooklyn Museum, Poetry Project, the High Line, the New Museum, and the Toronto Biennale. She appears in Nikki Giovanni's The 100 Best African American Poems and has been nominated for 2 Pushcart Prizes. To pre-order Funeral Diva from City Lights, which is currently offering all customers a 30% discount, please click the button below. And this ASL interpretation for the event was made possible through Pro Bono ASL, and we're so grateful for Amelia and Risa's participation today. Aditi, the floor is yours.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Well, not everyone, but most people. Thank you so much, Tara and Amelia and Risa for interpreting for us, and the Academy of American Poets for hosting. I am thrilled to be reading with Pamela Sneed. Thank you for your work, and thank you to everyone who has tuned in. So my book, Emporium, which looks like this, begins with a line, "I came along a silk route." I usually describe it as the journey of a transnational tradeswoman along a 21st century silk route. She's buying and selling her way across the globe. And she depends for her economic survival on the marketplace. But the market is also for her a field of pleasure, a place in which to interact with people and objects, to light up her senses, especially those of touch and smell. And of course, her pleasures are compromised and complicated. The marketplace becomes equally the site of reflection, of critique, and of refusal. So I'm going to read excerpts from two of the long poems. The first is from the titular poem Emporium. The chief comparison is to a quality of light. The people have not poured in as light, won't pour out. The poet's stall, vending short texts and long texts, scarves run through bodily fluids. We live in the clusterfuck. The chief definitions are here now. The chief epics are of markets spinning, carnival eyes, pastimes replete with blinds. The chief binaries fold and unfold. The garden in the kitchen is in the street. Sweet herbs and cow patties. Sweetness, the provocation and chief style of the poets. The extent to which history inscribes industrial products is perfume, one writes, cupping silver. Petals, petroleum, idioms profuse and tangled in the neck, a goblet. History paves the emporium and porous the gemlight. And says the purveyor, best not study such shapes, but silk, to me, of silks, of the brushing of blouses against silken nipples, of between her legs the stolen red. And even money isn't quite like money when silk buys me, or have I it, or has it blended in the fabrics of when there was a room for me to try on there was weather then and now too. It's silking my mind. And the qualities as they continue are the silk under the hand, reads the libel, silk. That's the dual error and shock of new precision, and involuntary, not involuntary exactly, but desired frisson. I've pulled the brocade off the rack. Accents ascend the sound field. Bonny suns climb the vaulted ceiling. Magnets. My senses, cursive, seek an angle. Sensing danger, name an enemy, nylon. Or did I mean history? Did I mean shale? And of what is it collaged? How does it cohere? Sudden queries, sudden as vendors. Do they sell fruit, sell textile? I've been so exact, I've cut corners. Oh, obsolescence. Oh, light brain, sifting the accidental tree. I desire cinema, in a sense, all factories sense the dilemma. Ought I shove off? And this is now from the other poem, and this is called Experiment with Aspic. And if you haven't heard that word aspic, A-S-P-I-C, before, I welcome you to Google it as I'm reading. It's a trip, believe me. Or if you want, you could just ask me about it in the Q&A. From Experiment with Aspic. Luxury, it is said, moves sometimes at midday. Mellow the light cast on such euphemistic striations. On the goat hooks up ahead, on the garlands up ahead, the muffled scene of death to which the lines proceed, curved. Citrus curling up the light, so tart it is. But here where it commences, here from where the lines endless proceed, here the voices, here the prices. Lacquer on this produce, surreal photography, tainted reverie. Nothing clean yet, presence implied, not seen. It proceeds, and extreme intelligence can be held in the hands, is. Slight burn from the citrus, slight build from up the ground. Euphemism for shanty, euphemism for indigence. Skinny body, slender bean, sturdy drumsticks, snap. Nothing clean, yet the causal knives luxuriate. Lone jackfruit, abandoned beehive, nightshade in terror of being shook. The lymph is anxious. The child rears her ugly head, slow capacity for memory. Lacquer, she says, lacquer on this. This kind of traffic is difficult to curb. Her skin is light, her mother's translucent. This is how it begins. The acts of comprehending things, softening into the basket, plastic, the voiceless hellos, a tendency hushed. An impossible sculptural aspect, her eyes laminate. Things mature along this aisle that's endless, and she too, in the town called Fraser, opposite the police station and the pork shop, parallel to the railway track, she too developed symptoms: hysteria, depression, a deviant, sexualized mesmerism. She told us, not without resistance, that she had had an education. Her mother spoke the apt languages. She said nothing but lacquer on this. The brain like a jelly, something trapped in it. She views it with her double eye, its glittering mound of curvatures, lipid rich broth. We call it in the vulgar gelatin. We will return to this point later. For the child rears her head to the sound of community, which she hears as tribe, later mafia. She appears to comprehend, but does not, the sorrow of haggling. Whether she might come to say it, let's not ensure. But it is here it commences. The thickenings of lymph, the persistent shyness, the passions. It is endless. Thank you.
So anyway, I'm Pamela Sneed. I'm really happy to be here. Thank the Academy of American Poets for inviting me, Tara. So at the end of every Holocaust film I've seen, and there are not that many, they show real life survivors and say the words, never again. Some of us, like me, stare into these films down the long tunnels of history, wondering how it could have ever happened at all. That a leader and his minions could be so toxic, so poisonous that you'd turn against your neighbors. You could be so oblivious, brainwashed, scared, desperate to be superior or to survive. You do anything, or almost. They say, never again, but it is again. As I look at the deportations, roundups, I'm reminded of Idi Amin when he cast out foreigners, and Forrest Whitaker in the film The Last King of Scotland when he played him. And to see it is again at rallies, at protests, they show the coat hangers and crude instruments women were forced to use in back alley abortions. We say never again, but taking away women's choices in Planned Parenthood, it is again. Today started out in an argument with someone who didn't understand why I mentioned race so much in my new book. And that white man is not the first. A Black woman asked too. I wanted to scream, hello, haven't you seen the news? Didn't you see what happened to Stephon Clark, unarmed and shot in the back 6 times by police? And who even cares what happens to women, Black lesbians, lesbians of color? There's no public outcry. A student once wrote to me in an academic paper that a parent forced her to stop playing sports because they said sports made her more of a dyke. It killed my student inside because she was an athlete. So the white guy I argued with about my book said he was just giving me some good advice from his experience as an empath. I said, I don't need your advice. I have reasons for talking about race and gender and the interpersonal. He said he was just trying to help me. I'll offer this non sequitur. Winnie Mandela died a few years ago. She had a great impact on me. I read she was nobility, but then the difference between her and how Princess Diana was treated. Everyone accepted and loved Diana's silent, passive status. She was allowed to be gorgeous. No one ever associated with her that dirty colonial stain. There are moments in the recent Winnie Mandela documentary that stand out to me, where she buried her face in her hands and screamed out, I've been betrayed. The other moment was when she said she was the only ANC member brought to TRC and made to testify, that Nelson Mandela forgave a nation, but he could never forgive her. What was done to Winnie is done to other Black women and working artists, Black women fighting to give language, resistance, but it only matters when a celebrity says or doesn't. At Cape Coast Castle in Ghana, after you've passed the door of no return, there is a plaque donated to the castle by the Black tribal elders. It reads, may we never sell ourselves into slavery again. But it is, again. And I'm reading from Funeral Diva. Size, color, class. I was never allowed to be little. And by little, I mean innocent. By little, I mean allowed to play, make mistakes. If anything occurred in whatever setting, I was always blamed. I was mistaken constantly for being older than I was. At 6, when my stepmother came, she refused to allow me alone time with my father. And if a moment occurred, she asked, "What were you doing with him?" As if at 6 I were molesting my father. I was caught once through an open bathrobe trying to see my father's penis. My stepmother never forgot. "You were trying to look at him," she said. I was not given toys, books, anything, stuffed animals, bows, ribbon, anything that may be attached to a little girl. I was also my mother's sounding board for her adult problems with my dad, constantly instructed to call the police when he hit her. The only thing my parents could figure out to do together for some small infraction was to give me punishment, 2 weeks. So I never knew the nurturance that girls got. My adult life has duplicated this, always to blame, outside, refusing to see my little girl. On occasion, my mother sent me to the store to get candy, things that she liked. Fireballs, Reese's peanut butter cups, Kit Kat bars, black licorice, sometimes red, which I liked, Twizzlers. I remember once chewing a pack of red Twizzlers as an adult. The red stem hung out of my mouth. A friend at the time exclaimed, "You're such a little girl." And once when I was with a woman, someone looked on and said, "Oh, your little girl is out." In relationships, too, I was never the little girl. In fact, in most of them, I rescued radically immature women. I was their mother, their caretaker, the one with all the responsibility. And of course, when it ended, I was always to blame. Everything to me lies around class, race, gender lines, even in so-called evolved communities, even with POC. I always know no one would treat a white-skinned woman or a man the way that I've been treated. In colleges where I teach, I'm always aware of hierarchy, people screaming about diversity. I moan, complain, how the AIDS narrative only belongs to men. They never ask women, Black women, as if AIDS didn't happen to us, our fathers, brothers, sons, nephews, cousins, acquaintances. The Black gay boys in the choir became our disappeared. I remember a pair of Black gay men who were spiritual, would act as ministers and bury the dead Black boys families wouldn't recognize. These men showed up as priests and gave last rites. And what of the women, a mother nursing a grown son, returned to a baby ravaged by AIDS, me being young myself going into sick wards like leper colonies, seeing those abandoned by society. I never forgot. Even my era did not allow me to be little, innocent, a threat if I spoke up, a competitor for middle class white girls who had the world handed to them and resented me, you, for surviving, thriving against all odds. And I'm going to read one more. And this is called Sidewalk Rage. I'm not sure why, but it's taken forever for me to write this poem. I hope to remember all the pieces, but I've developed a new condition, one that's come from age. I can no longer take the shit that I once did. And there's a part of my condition that comes from gentrification and cell phone use, living amidst tech zombies and their general fear and hatred of people of color. My condition is called sidewalk rage. It's kind of like road rage, and it comes when I'm walking down the street and there's some millennial who's just moved into the neighborhood who thinks it's theirs, a white girl who, in broad daylight, feels a dark presence walking behind her. It's me, minding my own business, and she gets so panicked and paralyzed, she stops walking and holds her purse. With my new condition, I yell, "If you don't want to live around Black people, get the fuck out of the neighborhood." She's shocked. Or in another scenario, you see random white women on their phones standing in a doorway, completely blocking it because, only they exist. And you're like, hello, hello. Yes, all these years I thought I was still a small town girl. And then suddenly, with my sidewalk rage, I'm a bona fide New Yorker, like the ones you've seen on bicycles banging on the hood of a taxi cab that tries to cut them off. My person with sidewalk rage is a character of their own. Where once I was silent, recently, I confronted a man who was blocking my path crossing the street. He had his head down and almost rammed into me. I sucked my teeth really loud and I shouted, "Hello! Hello! Move!" He was so angry, I confronted him. He yelled, "Suck my dick." I started to yell something profane, but I stopped myself. And then I was in the subway going downstairs, and a white man rammed into me on the phone. My sidewalk rage kicked in, and I thought for a second to sneak behind him and kick him down the stairs. That's my sidewalk rage. I stopped myself. I don't know who this person is in me who would never speak up for herself, was always soft and vulnerable, who's been at various times pickpocketed,
Hi. So while we're waiting for Pamela to kind of come back on, let's maybe start our Q&A off with you, Aditi, if that's okay. Cool. So first question from the audience is maybe if you could, so I've been thinking about aspects since you you asked about it. And there's this idea of both your work and in Pamela's work about these like suspension and preservation and archive. Maybe you can talk us through that a little bit.
Sure. And it's really wonderful to read with a poet who's also such a compelling memoirist. And one of the things that I know about myself is that I have a terrible memory, and so I would never be able to write a memoir. However, hi Pamela.
Hi.
Should we let Pamela finish the poem, or shall I go ahead? We just went into Q&A all of a sudden.
Oh, did I finish the poem? Did you hear me? Sharp edges?
No, Pamela, please, if you could finish your poem, we'd love to hear it.
Oh, okay. So you did hear Sidewalk Rage, right?
We heard up until you were like, it was, when did I become someone who was silenced?
Oh,
Right there.
oh my God. Okay, at the dramatic. Okay, let's see. Well, should I read the whole poem or just read the end?
Whatever you want to do.
Okay, I'm going to read the whole thing.
Cool. Okay.
Hopefully it will stay on. I'm not sure why, but it's taken forever for me to write this poem. I hope to remember all the pieces. But I developed a new condition, one that's come from age. I can no longer take the shit that I once did. And there's a part of my condition that comes from gentrification and cell phone use, living amidst tech zombies and their general fear and hatred of POC. My condition is called sidewalk rage. It's kind of like road rage, but it comes when I'm walking down the street and there's some millennial who has just moved into the neighborhood who thinks it's theirs, a white girl who in broad daylight feels a dark presence walking behind her. It's me, minding my own business, and she gets so panicked and paralyzed, she stops walking and holds her purse. With my new condition, I yell, "If you don't want to live around Black people, get the fuck out of the neighborhood." She's shocked. Or in another scenario, you see random white women on their phones standing in a doorway, completely blocking it because, you know, only they exist. And you're like, hello, hello. Yes, all these years I thought I was still a small town girl. And then suddenly with my sidewalk rage, I'm a bona fide New Yorker, like the ones you've seen on bicycles banging on the hood of a taxi cab that tries to cut them off. My person with sidewalk rage is a character of their own. Where once I was silent, Recently, I confronted a man who was blocking my path crossing the street. He had his head down and almost rammed into me. I sucked my teeth really loud and I shouted, "Hello, hello, move." He was so angry I confronted him. He yelled, "Suck my dick." I started to yell something profane, but I stopped myself. And then I was in the subway going downstairs and a white man rammed into me on the phone. My sidewalk rage kicked in and I thought for a second to sneak behind him and kick him down the stairs. That's my sidewalk rage, but I stopped myself. I don't know who this person is in me, who would never speak up for herself, was always soft and vulnerable, who's been at various times pickpocketed, blasphemed, body slammed, ransacked, ridiculed, who now has a voice, who now lets rage show, who couldn't express herself, has now become all angles and sharp edges. Thank you. I hope everyone heard that one. Yes. Do you have a problem with Black people? Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. All right, cool. Okay.
Thank you so, so much, Pamela. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad
Yeah,
we got to hear
Diva.
that. Yes. Oh my gosh. So I'm sorry, I'm like so energized by that reading. Okay. So before, let's kind of maybe go into this question of archive that we asked. Archive and preservation and the craft of that.
Well, I mean, basically, I'm creating an archive from my experience as a Black lesbian. Funeral Diva is all about coming of age in the AIDS era, and basically seeing my entire peer group decimated by AIDS, all men of color, gay men of color, and also Black lesbians from cancer. So you had Pat Parker and Audre Lorde and June Jordan, and so really it was a decade of like incredible growth. And incredible magic and literary, genius, and then in counterpoint, it was devastating, to see my whole generation kind of wiped out. I mean, at the beginning of Allen Ginsberg's Howl, he says, I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed. And that's what happened to me. So I'm trying to document that experience, all those people who were not documented. Anybody? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to have as great an answer as Pamela. In my own work, memory is something that's very difficult to get at. And this is kind of why I've become obsessed with the image of the aspic. So aspic is basically a kind of jellified meat broth with food sort of inside it. It's a European dish that hardly anyone eats anymore. And I think the parallel in the US would be like Jello salad or something. And because I really struggled to get at my memories, when I saw this aspect, it certainly seemed like, oh, this is what it's like, those little vegetables trapped inside the brain like a jelly. And I'm trying to get at it, but I have to go through this weird jelly. And so the second poem that I read is called Experiment with Aspic, because I was trying very hard to get at these memories that are very fuzzy for me of going shopping with my mother, growing up in India, where I'm from. And, I think because my book is so much about trying to understand money and what it means to hand over pieces of money and coin and then get stuff back out of it. I realized that I needed to get to this memory because this was my first experience of money. Because as a child, I would hold the basket with my mother and she would be haggling with the women and sometimes men selling vegetables on the street. And so that's kind of aspect is kind of like my metaphor for getting at memory and trying to get back to that. place. Yeah, I hope that kind of answers your question.
Mhm.
So, okay, Tara, you gonna continue with asking the questions? I was gonna ask Pamela the question that you texted me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So this is also a question from the audience. And the question is, can you walk us through the experience of picking a title for your collections? Funeral Diva is such a fantastic title. So yeah, people want to know.
Well, basically, it comes from the title piece, and it's a memoir poem, and basically it's about sort of chronicling, the deaths of all these gay men, gay poets to AIDS. And basically, and I became like a funeral diva. And so I would go to every funeral, and I was sort of like, I was a poet, I was a spokesperson. I was a friend of a lot of them. And so I'm kind of like, it's kind of wry, it's like tongue in cheek, because it's actually like rather devastating. And then in the piece, I talk about kind of like the irony of memorializing all of these men that were really like comrades, in like a war, you know what I mean? Like we were all soldiers, poet soldiers. And then like the person that I was closest to, I wasn't asked to memorialize. And so that was devastating, to me. But actually it all worked out because like 10 years later I got a call, from Greg Bordowitz, and he was doing something at the Whitney, on other countries, the Black Gay Literary Troupe, and they asked me to eulogize Donald Woods. And I said, oh my God, he was my best friend. And so the resolution, came, I don't know, like almost 2 decades later, and there I stood at the Whitney, and Donald's, image was behind me. And yeah, and I got to, like I said, I had to return to the war front, reconstruct his body parts, and bring him home. So yeah, good question. Do you want to talk about your title?
Yeah, I mean, mine's really simple and straightforward. It's just Emporium, and it's really just being about being in these marketplaces. And the Emporium, it's a word that I think sometimes we associate with sort of the ancient Greek city. It was really the place where everybody in the city came together, or, well, more accurately, the agora. So, and I think I picked that word Emporium because, and this is also an experience that we don't have properly anymore because of being in quarantine, is that the marketplace was a place where everyone was out there, people of different classes, people were selling and buying, but they were also they were being lawyers, they were being political. And it's sort of hard to imagine what this ancient Greek space was like. I feel like I've seen bits of it in growing up in India, but that's not really how a supermarket works. And of course, we're increasingly doing online shopping. So having to sort of think about the marketplace is not like Amazon, but really that kind of place where people are around each other and bartering, and they're sharing ideas. So that's why I picked Emporium. I'm going to see if we have more questions on my phone. Here's another question, Pamela. What were your introductions to poetry? Or is maybe Pamela frozen? Okay. I'll take that question and then I'll pose it to Pamela when she's back. My introduction to poetry, I would say probably like most people, going to school and reading poetry in class. However, I grew up in a very different kind of educational system. So we would basically read all these old British poets, and that was considered sort of great poetry. And it was only when I was sort of in my teen years, we had like because of the internet, I really started getting on message boards. So this is, I guess, way before Twitter and Facebook and many other kinds of social media. It was old school. It was message boards, and people would have these workshops, and I, thought myself kind of a poet, but I didn't have anyone to, share it with or get feedback with. And I didn't have a creative writing class at that age. So I basically would just put it on the internet, and I made a lot of internet friends just based on that. And then, I feel like my introduction to poetry was the internet, and I was reading Poets.org and Poetry Foundation. I got a lot out of that. Hey, Pamela.
Hey, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, like when I first went to school, I went to Northeastern University in Boston before I transferred to the new school. And so and I went to school with Wendy Williams, and the radio talk show host.
Okay.
Yeah, she was my best friend. And we went through a program called Project Ujima, and it was like to retain African American students. And like, so there was the African American Institute, and we were indoctrinated in all things like, African American and the griot tradition. And I started like making poems then. And I think, like, I remember as a child, the first poem that I ever heard was Maya Angelou, and it was on television, and it was like an advertisement for her audio cassette. And all I remember is, "You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies." And like that, like, opened up the windows and all the doors and everything. And I think that was the first thing that like planted a seed, that a person could be a poet, and that kind of lyricism. And then also I was really acting out in 4th grade, and I got sent to a guidance counselor. And I ended up with like a Black woman, the only Black woman in the school system. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to get thrown out of school. And I wanted the the big white man who looked like Santa Claus to be my guidance counselor, but I got the skinny Black woman. And I thought, I was going to get in trouble. And instead she gave me a book about Harriet Tubman. And I read that. It was called Runaway Slave, and I read that book, 1,000 times. And then the first book that I ever wrote myself was based on, it was a retelling of the Harriet Tubman story. And so that had a profound impact on me. So I think all those things.
Awesome. I think we're gonna wait for Tara to come back and wrap things up for us.
Hi, y'all.
Hey.
Thank you so much for this event, and for both of you coming and participating, for sharing your work with us tonight. And thank you so much to our ASL interpreters, Amelia and Risa and Pro Bono ASL. And thank you, of course, all of you in attendance for joining us for Books Noted Live. We're so, so grateful for your support of the poets that we featured this evening. And I highly recommend that you pre-order their copies of Funeral Diva by Pamela Sneed and Emporium by Aditi Machado, published by City Lights Books and Nightboat Books. And as a reminder, City Lights is offering a 30% discount for the pre-order for Pamela's book. So run, don't walk to your internet and buy those books, because as you can see, these poets, they're just life-altering, and this has been so lovely. Our next Books Noted Live will be a virtual reading and conversation that will take place on Friday, October 23rd, and will feature the poets Yona Harvey and Taylor Johnson. To register for this event, please see our full fall-winter lineup at Poets.org. And thanks so much. That's it. Have a good evening and take good care. Bye, y'all.